Cleveland Browns defeated the Washington Commander Skins 24-10 in one of the most dominating performances the Browns have had this year, which is strange considering how poorly they played in the first half. But it was the best second half they played all year by far. That's good. So the Browns now find themselves 7-9 heading into Pittsburgh, the last game of the season, which with a whole lot of weight on the line. That's interesting. Anyway, so there's a lot going on with all of that, but we'd sort of be remiss if we didn't start with talking about the thing everybody had to sort of witness and is still going through, which is Buffalo Bills safety Damar Hamlin, who suffered a cardiac event during the game. Terrifying from the standpoint of he took a shot to his torso, rib area, got up, and then went down, and then medical personnel was rushing on the field. Nobody knew what was going on. Then suddenly you hear reports that they're doing CPR and everybody's, lost. Just the game is over at that point. Credit, just cannot say enough wonderful things about the on-field medical staff that was able to jump right on it, act. They're trained to do this stuff, but, his life hangs in the balance at this point. They're able to restart his heartbeat and get him to be transported to Cincinnati Hospital, where he is currently in critical condition. The last report I saw was there's some lung damage, but he's on less oxygen than he was before. Still critical condition, but it sounds like things are heading in the right direction, which is everybody's grateful. But he's certainly not out of the woods yet, and everybody's still sort of in this waiting to see what happens and hoping he's okay before they really want to proceed with anything else, which, is a challenging situation. So, Bree, you're here unexpectedly.
Unexpectedly.
Where are you at with this whole thing?
Yeah. So we're recording this on a Tuesday evening. So, almost 24 hours after everything went down. And I was watching the game live. I'm really looking forward to the Bills versus Bengals game all day because I was off of work yesterday. So it was my final day of being off work. And instead I found myself obviously pretty shocked as to what we were witnessing. And Pete, I will just say, as it happened, they cut to the commercial breaks, not once, but twice. I think it was the second time where I texted a group chat and I was like, are we even sure he's alive at this point? Because I was preparing myself for this is not good. They didn't have any information that they were sharing at that point. The cameras, fortunately, could not even get a glimpse as to what was going on. And then we come to find out that they had been administering CPR for a good 9 minutes. And that's when it was confirmed how grave of a situation it was. And I think if you were observant at all as someone watching this game, you would have known that based on some of the players' reactions and what they were showing, grown men crying, praying. But it was so confusing because then you also saw some of the players start to warm up and you saw Stephon Diggs try to pull his team together and say a speech. I mean, so it was just, I would say just a lot of confusion and not a lot of clarity from the viewing standpoint, which I understand, obviously, in hindsight. They couldn't talk about it because nobody knew the situation, nor do I think they wanted to jump to conclusions at that point, while also understanding and protecting his privacy. And so I think coming out of all of it, it's just a reminder again that these athletes, they're humans. They are sons, brothers, fathers, uncles, friends. I mean, I think it's so easy to watch day in, day out, these athletes look like they're superhuman. I know they get paid millions of dollars to play this sport, and we all think that they're the luckiest people in the world to get to do what they love, and they are. But they also are human, and there's emotion behind it, and there's a brotherhood, and there is danger to what they do. And I think we saw all of those things play out on a national setting last night. My thought just goes out to all of them. And the officials, the first responders that were on the scene, the training staff. I mean, I understand that these people are trained professionals and they are preparing themselves in their profession to deal with situations like this, but it doesn't make it any less traumatic of an experience to go through. And so I just am thinking about all of them and how they are handling this, because I mean, Pete, it's real. Like, having secondary trauma to a situation is real. And I just hope that they're all doing okay and they all have support and are leaning on each other. But in no way did I ever think that they should have played a football game after that. And I'm really happy that they decided not to.
Right. The situation gets really complicated because it's the NFL is such a regimented schedule where everything happens on a weekly basis. It's
Right.
not like so many other sports where you can sort of cancel, postpone a day and come back the next day.
Yeah.
So, or you're in a situation where, like baseball, you have 162 games. It's not really the end of the world if you miss one. And football's different. Like, so much of that is, the money involved and everything else. There's an expectation, it's tough, but I think ultimately I think the vast majority of people can agree they handled it the right way, even if it didn't get there in the smoothest way possible. I don't want to delve too much into that, but just they got to where they needed to get to. I thought the teams were great on this. So, all the best to everybody with Damar Hamlin, his family, and the respective teams, because, it's a tough spot to be if you are T. Higgins.
Yeah.
The Bengals receiver. You're involved in that hit. Like, some part of you can't help but think, did I
did this?
And and what does that do to him? Nothing about that play was particularly, malicious. I mean, just the week before, we saw one of the worst hits we've seen all season with the Chargers and Derwin James, who goes full on helmet to helmet, absolutely obliterates the receiver he hits, knocks himself out, not out cold, but gives himself a concussion. He could not play this week. And I remember when he was ejected, there were people going, why is he being ejected?
Right.
So yes, they are human. And you and I sort of talked about this a little bit. These, we're same week last week, and people are like calling the Browns soft for not wanting to play in negative 15 degrees. It's like, part of it is the helmets. You can't see faces, so it becomes sort of easy to sort of look at them as gladiators and not real people. But there's a human element to this. I can only say to my part, I remember watching Damar Hamlin at Pitt, like scouting him, seeing what he could do for the NFL potentially as a fit for the Browns. So I'm certainly familiar with him. He was a great player at Pitt, and in that realm, he was a missile. He would go find people and find the ball and make plays. So like. Best thing that could possibly come out of this is he obviously becomes okay, gets through this, recovers fully. I'm not going to speculate as to where his life goes from here, but that's the only thing that matters right now is he gets to, keep living. So, a smooth transition from that into the first half of the Browns Commanders game, which at one point I got a one-word text from Bree.
What did that text say?
It just said Pete.
Period. It was a sentence. Just FYI, that was a sentence.
That first half was, I think that first half was worse than the game last week in a lot of ways.
Pete. I wasn't even supposed to be watching this game. And so I'm getting myself all like psyched up to watch this game because, now I get to watch the game and I'm like, the weather, it's not bad. So this is going to be really fun. And we're going to get to see what this team is actually going to look like. And then the first half happened. And I feel like it was like living in a simulation. Like I was like, this is a joke. Like this whole thing is a joke. This isn't real. I'm not actually experiencing this. And, my son, little dude, infamous little dude, was like really stoked to watch the game with me that day because he was coming off of watching the Buckeyes game with me, did not make it up for the whole thing, but he was very intently watching the Buckeyes the night before, and he's like, I'm going to watch the Browns with you tomorrow. And so that first half is what he had endured, full attention span. And I was like, you know what? Like, go play on your Nintendo. Like, you do not have to sit through this game anymore. I don't even know what to say about it. But I was very, very concerned, Pete, after that first half. Like, I was like, what are we doing?
You know what the funny part about that is? That first half and the way that game played out, that is what a great football team looks like. And what I mean by that is you're going to be like, you're crazy. How many teams have we watched? You know, the Buffalo Bills against the Browns played like crap for an entire half. And then they came out in the second half and we're just like, no, we're better than you.
Thank goodness, Pete. Thank goodness.
So, but yeah, it was like the Browns. A
tale of two halves. I mean, it was like two different worlds.
I would relate a lot to college football. And how many games you have the super talented team who gets a really tough go of it for a half against an inferior opponent, and then sort of the depth and the talent just sort of shows through, and you get that valiant effort, and then after a while that top opponent just says no, and we're putting an end to this.
Yeah.
So like looking at it through that whole lens, I was sort of like, okay, yeah, this is what a great team looks like. The Browns defense hung in there, played really well, save for the one drive, 21 plays for 96 yards. And
just mind-boggling things happening in that first half.
So that, we talk about what the Browns haven't had on defense. And like, we look at teams like the Pittsburgh Steelers who won a game doing virtually nothing on offense for the entire
I hate the Steelers so much. 2 weeks in a row.
Right. And the Ravens are sort of in the same boat right now.
Right.
But if you can play tough defense, you allow yourself the ability to get these opportunities and chances and continue, then you can figure things out. And the Browns, fortunately the Commanders didn't do much on offense. And part of that was the curious decision to go with Carson Wentz, we'll call it. But you credit where it's due. They hung in there and they were able to hold them to 7 points in the first half on the one drive. And it was the last drive of the half, which has been a problem for the Browns and that turnaround. But first half offense was interesting. One, because people who have been pounding the drum for just run the ball a million times got everything they wanted. Nick Chubb was running the ball pretty well. Like, he was averaging something like 16 yards per carry.
Yes.
And the Browns were not passing it well. And some of their plays were downright pathetic and some of this is a credit to the Commanders defense. They did some good things, but like, there was just some situations where like, the play everybody will point to is the play where Deshaun Watson was pressured and ended up throwing the ball at Jack Conklin. Like,
that's when I was like, is clown music going to go off at any point?
That may have been when I got the text.
I think it might. Yes, I think that actually might have been when it was, because I think your response was, well, the positive, Deshaun Watson is really good at escaping sacks to then get sacked. I was like, okay, that's enough. That's enough. We're done here. But it was
to his credit, he was impressive, sort of getting out of some of these plays. I was like, this is really great. And then nothing would come of that. And you ended up getting the one field goal. And then we got the infamous field goal. They had points and they took them off the board.
Yes.
Because they got the penalty and a shorter fourth down, and they went for it.
Yes. My son was very confused as to how the Browns had 3 points taken away from them. I was like, well,
And look, there's a lot here. This whole circumstance is interesting to me. Based on the play call they had, if you look at almost went there. Commanders defense, they had an odd front. They had like basically 6 guys on the box. They were spread out because the Browns ran a naked or a empty formation. And if you looked at the play, like just where they wanted to go with the play, you're sitting there going, this is wide open. And then Wyatt Teller got sort of a clumsy block that didn't give Watson a very clean lane to go to. It should have been inside, and he ended up going outside. And they ultimately get stuffed, and it looks bad. It looks in some ways almost like the infamous DeShone Kizer sneak, I think against the Lions. And, I can complain about the play call. I think, with Deshaun Watson, you can say, look, give him a passing play that gives him the option to run. I mean, you're paying him all this money to be that dude. Give him something. I still don't hate the play call, but obviously the result looks awful. The thing I keep coming back to is, one, the Browns immediately got them the ball back. Of course, they wasted the next possession, which is just indicative of the half. And then two, everybody gets so worked up about not taking field goals. It didn't matter at all. It could have been 7-6 at the half. Okay, it could have been 7-6. And the people get mad and go, well, how can you take 3 points off the board? And the answer is really simple, because the difference between 3 points and 7 points is 4. And the difference between 0 points and 3 points is 3. One of these is bigger than the other one. So you're going to try to emphasize going for 4 points more often than 3. I don't know. This is a battle that some people are ever going to understand. And I think we've talked about this before. I hate the argument of momentum, because we base momentum on how we feel, not how players feel, because we don't know. We assume they must feel the same way, but they do this all the time. Like their process is, no, it's 4th and short. We go for it. This is who we are. This is what we want to be. They didn't get it, and it didn't bother them at all. Like, at least from my view, the offense didn't click yet, but the defense came out, immediately gets a stop. They get the ball back. The offense wastes that next position, like I said, but it doesn't hurt this team the way it hurts onlookers, fans and media, who absolutely cannot control themselves when the Browns don't kick a field goal with a field goal kicker they usually hate anyway.
Yeah, and I think in fairness in some defense of some fans, is this wasn't necessarily the offensive juggernaut that we were playing against. And so I think there was a lot less risk in going for it there, because our defense was playing. I mean, Carson Wentz threw an interception on his first throw of the game. So
it's a great play by Ward.
It was a great play. And so I think we have to remember that all of those situations factor into the decisions that are being made. And I had no problem with it. I mean, I said this before, I would rather have a coach be more aggressive and believe in their offense versus settling.
Now,
and yes, go ahead.
You watched the Steelers game, right?
I did.
Greg Roman, the Ravens offensive coordinator, had the ball and ran the ball 3 times for nothing, punted the ball, and gave the Steelers ample opportunity to go win the game.
I know, and they did.
That's the mindset I would be terrified to have. And that is the mindset that got Marty Schottenheimer shipped out of here for all of his success. And now we're afraid to be the opposite. And you can argue, well, it's too extreme. Screw that. Go for it. The teams that are aggressive tend to be rewarded for it. And the teams that matter, the teams that you have to be able to beat, to make the postseason, to be good in the postseason, are with rare exception going to be beat by field goals. You got to score points. Part of what was so exciting about the potential of that Bills Bengals game was just how fast the offenses went right down the field. And you were just oh, it's going to be an endless score fest. And the Bills took points, and it's sort of oof. And the immediate feeling was, oof, they didn't get 7. That might hurt them.
Yeah.
But whether it's those two teams, whether it's the Chiefs, whether it's teams like the Eagles, all these teams that are great, field goals, it's points. It's, all this crap about points on the road and whatever. It doesn't matter. You have to, with rare exception, it's usually anecdotal that the field goal is really going to hurt you. It's more about that process. The process is going to reward you with wins overall. And again, I don't want to be the Ravens. I don't want to live in that shell. And obviously, look, part of that is Tyler Huntley. Part of that is you have your best receiver right now is DeMarcus Robinson, because you're so injured. It's a tough spot to be in, but that is the world I do not want to live in. So I'm happy with Kevin Stefanski continuing to be aggressive. And the other part I was happy with, and I get it, as a coach, my thought would have been, look, it's not going well. Let's run the hell out of Chubb to get on the board first, and then we can sort of do this. Now, I respect Stefanski saying, look, without saying it, I assume his thought process is like, Deshaun Watson is the thing that's going to matter for this thing. He has to get right. None of this other stuff matters unless he gets figured out. And they did not panic. They sort of kept going with it. They worked their way through it. Did not look good for a whole half. The amount of people who were trying to fire everyone before the end of the half to then come out and see what we saw. That's why, those are part of the reasons I think Kevin Stefanski is the right man for this job. He understands who his team is and what's important to them, what's going to get them to enjoy success. Now, it was a massive sigh of relief. It cannot be understated that if they had another half like that, it was going to be ugly. To their credit, sticking with the process in the first half, making some adjustments in the second half, and then just playing better, which is the key. Like, don't get me wrong, the Browns ran different plays. They're able to exploit what the Commanders were doing defensively, but they adjust every game. Everybody is adjusting all the time. It's constantly a process of intaking information and reacting to it. But the reason those second half adjustments worked is because you had a really talented quarterback who started playing like a really talented quarterback. And all of a sudden you just go off.
Yeah. And for me, that was the biggest thing. And the thing that I was honestly the most concerned about in the first half, because like I said, I was anticipating, because the weather was not a factor, right? Because it's been really difficult to evaluate Deshaun's play with his first game being back with the rust. And then you had some weather impact that you just were questioning, is this weather? It was super windy, and then it was negative 20 degrees outside. So it was really hard to evaluate his play. And then we had positive variables when it comes to the weather factor, and we got not great performance from him. So that's why I was initially panicking, was because I was like, this is not good. Like this is not what we signed up for. I don't know if I can take another half of watching this offense, particularly him, struggle, and with already a sinking ship is what it felt like to me.
There's no getting around the fact that Deshaun Watson was bad in the first half. Like, there are a lot of things that went wrong, but he was bad.
To the point where I was like, he's broken. And I don't know. But then, but that's like the initial response, right?
Sure.
You're in the moment. That's all you have to go off of is the moment. And I was starting to be like, I can't do this. Why am I going to be a fan of this team? I'm starting to question my life existence just in general, which I know is overreacting. I was ready to jump off the ship 100% and just be like, I'm going to have to text Pete and tell him I'm not going to do this podcast. I can't do this. So then the second half goes through and I'm like, okay, calm down. Like, you were clearly overreacting, like give it some time. And I started to talk myself into, okay, it's still only the fifth game. This offense is pretty much starting all over again with a new quarterback. They're trying to get comfortable with each other. I'm going through all of these things like, what did you expect, Brie? Like, just that like things automatically are going to just turn around in an instant. And so when we saw the second half play the way that it did, I was like, okay, this is what I think we can look forward to and what we can go off of. And I just hope, Pete, that, and we're going to know, I guess, a little bit more next week, but I just hope that this wasn't a flash in the pan and that this is what we can anticipate moving forward with this entire team. And my hope is against the Steelers, which, Pete, I want to beat the Steelers in the worst way possible. And I know we all do. I really know we all do. But I think about a year ago where we were playing against the Steelers at their stadium on national TV. I believe was it a Monday or Sunday night? I don't remember. But we watched Baker Mayfield's funeral play out live on national television. And I don't want that to happen again. And I just think about, if Deshaun Watson is able to take this team and beat the Steelers in the final game and ruin their chance at playoffs and give them a losing season, I think I think this fandom is going to be very, very pleased. And I think there's going to be a lot of people very happy with the state of the current team.
Yes, we put way too much weight on the Steelers, but we put a lot of weight on the Steelers. Like there's no
100%.
Like there's no getting around. Like
because I'm sick of seeing TJ Watt just parade around kicking his stupid high leg.
So yeah, you're in this situation. The Browns are 7-9. 8-9 is not what we signed up for, I guess, in some ways, even though that's exactly the record I predicted for this team. 4-2 with Deshaun Watson. All these things would be really important for them. And part of what was so gratifying about the game against Washington, because I saw certain media members chirping, going, well, we can see which team's really invested in playing this game. No, the Browns wanted to win that game.
Like, yeah, absolutely.
All the shits. And they played hard. In fact, they played harder than the Commanders.
Yeah, which was also like really nice to see, especially after that first half, because Pete, like we've been here before. We've been in January with this football team who was so far out of the playoff picture, just give up and essentially roll over because they know they're going to be on a vacation and a cruise the next week or so. So we're not like, we're used to that as fans. We're used to seeing this team kind of just roll over and give up, especially like when things aren't going their way. So to actually see them, I mean, they played hard, Pete. Like I've talked about this before of my frustration sometimes of watching this team is when I watch other teams play, even teams with less talent than what the Browns have on their roster, it's frustrating to see them outcompete other teams that they're playing when they have no business in winning. And on Sunday, we witnessed a team that had a lot of fight and that looked like they wanted to win this game, like substantially. And they did outplay their opponent. Like that, to me, in January, in a game that really doesn't mean much, like it meant a lot.
Yeah, and like, well, one, if Deshaun Watson beats the Steelers in his first game against the Steelers in Pittsburgh, ending their playoff hopes and all that stuff, that would be huge. There's just no getting around. If he plays well and they go out and beat, like, let's say he goes and throws 3 touchdowns against the Steelers and they win, be enormous. And I'm not going to make proclamations like people who hated Deshaun Watson are going to suddenly like him, but I think it will galvanize the people who have sort of been like you were in the first half against Washington, where you're sitting there going, I don't know. It will firmly sort of unite people behind what this team is doing.
Right.
Even if it's only for about 3 weeks. But in that 3 weeks, it will be glorious that everybody's sort of really believing in this team before they then decide to pick and poke. But like, he will have then beat the Steelers and the Ravens in his first 2 starts. That's not a small deal. And people can try to minimize that if they want, but that would be a huge deal. Likewise, if they lose and he doesn't play well, it's going to be obnoxious, even if it shouldn't be. Because in some ways it feels like both these teams are playing with free money. The Steelers, there's some pressure on them in the sense that they don't want to, have a losing season, but like their playoff chances
supposed to be here either. Yeah.
Yeah. They're not. Yes, exactly. They're not supposed to be there. The playoffs are really hard for them to achieve. They need they need to win and 2 other teams to lose. But like for both of these teams, they are more excited about 2023 than 2022. I think it's fair to say. So in that way, it's sort of like this weird freeing dynamic. I think the other part that's sort of encouraging is, now granted, by the end of this podcast, the Browns could have another linebacker on injured reserve, but both teams seem reasonably healthy. I don't want to really speak for the Steelers. The Browns feel healthy. Like they looked healthy in that game. And that's been another thing. Obviously last year, this was a big thing. The Browns, were like the car at the end of Tommy Boy, which, it has been the case in a lot of seasons, where they just sort of are barely keeping things together to finish out the season. This year, they feel like they have some strength left, and obviously guys are excited, guys are motivated. I think all these things are really important. So I'm that would be great. I would love to see that. Coming into the second half against the Commanders, the defense had just given up a 21 play, 96 yard. I think it took 45 minutes of time of possession, something around there. Or at least maybe it just felt like that. Endless. The 5 third down conversions and a 4th down conversion, and they come out, and you have reason to believe that maybe they're tired or whatever. They came out and just punched Washington right in the mouth the first drive.
Yes.
3 plays, punt, and it's like, okay, they sort of answered the bell that they needed to. They needed to come out and have that, because even last week against the Saints, they give a field goal right before the half. They gave the touchdown right after the half. And that was sort of, that ended up being the difference in the game. They answer, the offense gets the ball, and then suddenly it's the Browns start going, and it starts looking like an offense. And all of a sudden, the protection is effective. Deshaun Watson is throwing accurately. He's throwing on time. And more importantly, guys are just open. Like,
yes. I mean, Amari Cooper didn't see the ball in the first half, right?
He only got targeted 4 times, so I don't think I think that's right. And it wasn't even like the thing that I like, where I think this is the thing people need to sort of appreciate and sort of look to and go, okay, this is why this team can be good, is the touchdown pass that they open up with, which was eerie. It was the strangest touchdown I've ever seen, from the pure standpoint of Amari Cooper runs an out route. He just beats Kyle Fuller, to the point where the dude is just has no chance. He catches the ball. And what you're thinking at the time was, okay, first down,
he's out of bounds.
It was 3rd down, and okay, we move the chains. And then Amari Cooper just runs through what, Kyle Fuller.
He literally ran a straight line.
And like, there's no energy whatsoever in the stadium as he casually runs up the sideline. And then he sort of pulls up at the end and slows down, and you just and it's sort of, even on like, live on Twitter and stuff, it's sort of like, oh, okay, touchdown, Browns are winning.
Just very casual, Pete.
No juice whatsoever. It was almost like no one, people had literally taken your initial impression, but it's like, I'm doing something else with the rest of my day. They all followed Maddox's lead and went and did something else. And it was just sort of like, all right, 10-7. It was just that easy to be that thing. But like I said, what I like about that is it took a very simple play, little outplay, and we have receivers like Amari Cooper, who's good enough to just be like, no, I'm this guy, and I'm just going to run down the field and score a touchdown. And all of a sudden, and I think part of the reason it felt weird was like, it felt like a fluke in some ways, not because of what happened, just because of what the Commanders did to it. And it was sort of like, okay, they scored. Now it's going to go back, and it's just going to continue to be this slog, and it's just going to be this miserable football game again. And so the Browns kick off the ball. Washington gets 1 first down, and then they get that 3rd and 8. I think it was 3rd and 8. And all of a sudden, Myles Garrett is lined up a couple feet from the center. I can only imagine what was going through that. I can imagine how, like, the saucer-sized eyes that guy must have had as he's getting ready to snap the ball with Myles Garrett with a running start. And then, if that wasn't bad enough, they loop Jadeveon Clowney behind.
Yes.
Myles Garrett blows right through it, easy sack. And it was just like, it was funny because at the time, the commentators, like, we haven't really had reason to call Myles Garrett's name all that much. And they see him there, and they're like, oh, here he comes. Boom, sack, end of drive. Like, and, for the people who like to occasionally complain that Myles Garrett doesn't make impact plays or whatever, the amount of times that seems to be exactly what happens, where he's just like, no, the drive's over. We're done here. Give us the ball back. Immediately shuts it down. They get the ball back, and suddenly then on that ensuing drive, it no longer feels like a fluke. Now the Browns are just cooking, and they're hitting wide open receivers. Amari Cooper's getting open. David Njoku, they hit for 20 some yards on a slot fade.
Yep.
And it's crazy.
Nick Chubb is running efficiently. Yes.
And like, it was balanced. I think Cam Justice made a point about asking about this in one of the press conferences, saying, it felt like the offense was balanced, which is what you want to have happen, constantly having those threats. And one of the things that we've been waiting for was to see Deshaun Watson create downfield passing. And none of these were throwing 50 yards in the air or anything like that, But in the whole game, which was 9 completions, which is again sad, but 9 completions, 4 of them were either explosive play, or I should say 5 were either explosive plays, touchdowns, or both. Like that is what we were sort of waiting for. And it doesn't mean that they were all great throws down the field. Like I said, the Amari Cooper thing was a simple out route. He runs up the field, but these other passes were all down the field. They they weren't super deep, but 20 yards is 20 yards. A lot of them were big conversions, some third down conversions that they needed a big play. But Amari Cooper had 3 catches. All of them were explosive. He had a 46-yard touchdown, like a 33-yard touchdown, and like a 20-something yard reception. David Njoku had a 20-something yard reception. Those are explosive plays. And it really seemed like the Browns were delivering body blows to that Commanders defense. You could see him, like that second drive, it felt like Deshaun Watson was heating up. He was getting very comfortable. And all of a sudden it was like, okay, somebody's in trouble.
Yeah, that was really fun to watch. It would be nice to obviously have a full game of that. And I guess we'll find out if that can happen on Sunday against the Steelers. But yeah, it was really nice to see the offense be really efficient and not fluky, as you called it. I think that was that's a good word to describe like how it's felt since he's been back, where it hasn't quite felt like it's supposed to. And we saw some flashes, we saw some plays here or there, but nothing quite felt consistent like we saw this second half come together. And also, Pete, like I know you touched on Miles a little bit, but it was nice just to see the entire team really play complementary football, which is something that we also really haven't seen this entire season, even with Jacoby Brissett at the quarterback position when Deshaun was suspended. Because we've had games where the defense played really well and the offense played poorly, or vice versa, where the offense played well, the defense played poorly, or the special teams just ruined everything. But this was really the first kind of balanced half of football that we saw in totality. And what's unfortunate about the whole thing is we only have one more game to be able to evaluate this team again. And that's what makes me, I think, the saddest about all of it, is that as much as that first half was extremely frustrating, if they go out on Sunday and look like they did in the second half, then I'm sad that the season's over, because it would have been really nice to see this team continue on the upward, and you never know what can happen once you get into a new season.
Yeah. I think you saw a lot. Well, obviously what we want to see from Deshaun Watson, and you can say, well, I wish it was the full game. And you're right. I want to see him do that for a full game. But 3 straight drives, they scored touchdowns, and it felt like they completely dominated a very credible defense. You can't sit there and go, well, they beat the crap out of the Texans, because they didn't. They beat a team where some of us are openly hoping that one of their players comes and joins the Browns this offseason. We'll see how realistic that is. But it's going to be interesting to see how they progress from here. But if they can carry some of that over, like I would say it's dangerous to then now assume that, okay, they're good now, that like all of a sudden it's going to be fixed. I think you're still sitting there going to Pittsburgh with probably some warranted nerves to see how this goes. But just the amount that they were able to get comfortable, the amount that Watson was able to feel good, the whole team was able to feel good. And there were so many nice little things that we saw mixed into this game, into that second half offense, some of the things they set up. But like, for example, they went that Deshaun Watson quarterback counter, which was absolutely beautiful. They sold the fake to Nick Chubb. He's going to the right. They pull the guard and the tackle to the left. Deshaun Watson runs right through 21 yards. And you're sitting there going, wow, like it looked easy too. Or they go out the second drive, they ran the ball 3 straight times with Chubb. And then what do? They come in with Jerome Ford and say, no, we're not done running. And they threw that nice little toss to him, 9 yards. And like those little tweaks that we're starting to see more of these other players that they want to get involved in some of the things we did. Like, there are a lot of people who are disappointed, or I think are disappointed with what we've seen from Harrison Bryant, but he had a nice little game in this one. And it was never complicated. He was just wide open. But you got those nice little contributions. And it was strange because Donovan Peoples-Jones had one catch, but it was a touchdown pass. And it felt like more than they were doing. But like he completed, I think, the 9 passes, but I think it was for like 169 yards. That's pretty good. That you see all these things. So I'm curious, when was the moment? This is always interesting with this team. When did you feel like the Browns were good? When it was locked up?
You mean for the game?
Yes. When did you think the Browns had this you're like, no, Browns win.
When Delpit intercepted the ball.
So initially, I agree. That's where I was too, but I didn't start there. I originally was like, when Cooper caught that second touchdown, I was like, no, it's over. And I had to remind myself, Jets game.
Come on, Pete. We know better. I literally was like thinking about all the scenarios that was going to play out, that they were going to score a quick touchdown, they were going to recover the onside kick, and then we were going to see the Jets game happen all over again. So when Delpit intercepted the ball for the second time in the game, I was like, I think we can breathe. I think it's time. I think we can be calm.
It was weird because the game just had such a different feel than that Jets game did, because the Jets moved the ball throughout that game, even if they didn't score points, and like the Commanders were just stopped. But yes, I deferred, and ultimately it was the Delpit second interception. I was like, all right, we're good here. But it was nice to feel like they had control, considering how ugly that half was and everything went with it. All right, we are joined by Abby Mueller for a few important reasons. One, since Bree wasn't originally going to be here, the plan was that Abby was going to be here. And two, and most importantly, why are you here, Abby?
Most importantly, because I am undefeated on this podcast.
That's right.
We figured out the other one that I was on for, which was the first Bengals game on Halloween. So I had Carolina, Bengals, and now this. So I don't know. It's probably the best luck podcast out there, because I'm not undefeated on my own podcast. So
well, it's important because, you know, certain people may or may not have been shopping for groceries or running errands and potentially putting this game against the Steelers at risk. But now
we couldn't do that.
I won't let them down.
now I feel reasonably confident. Now, at one point, the two of you asked me if you could run through at one point there was going to be this idea that you were going to decide how every Browns game felt based on a Taylor Swift song.
Oh, yeah.
So now that you are both here, I'm curious, the slop that was the first half compared to the glory of the second half, what Taylor Swift song are you guys going to put this to?
I already have mine, Abby. I hope I don't take yours. There's a lot of options, I think.
I feel like I'm thinking of ones for like each half, but it's hard to find a word to collectively describe the entirety of this game.
Okay, so I was going to go with Snow on the Beach, Pete. And I don't know if you know Taylor's lyric, but this game was like snow on the beach, weird but fucking beautiful.
I'm trying to
Am I allowed to swear on our podcast? I don't usually swear.
Sure. We'll get an explicit rating. But
that's good, because I was almost going to use vigilante shit, so I was going to say
okay, so
he's like, what are these words?
No,
it's time to just, Pete, it's time for you to go. We're just going to keep talking about Taylor Swift the rest of the night.
Hey, that would probably do well. Abby, big takeaways for you from this one. Obviously, like I said, we saw all how this game went. So what are your big thoughts coming out of this one?
Yeah, so I think after the first half, like most people, I was just like, how is this ever going to come together? Like, it was definitely concerning because it was, good weather. We didn't have anything really to blame it on. Washington was not playing well, especially offensively. Like, we had opportunities. And so it was definitely a frustrating first half, but I was definitely encouraged by what they were able to put together in the second half. And it's not like it was just one drive. Like, there were 3 touchdown drives in there, which is exciting. Like, I know the receivers for the most part were wide open, so it's not like crazy throws were being made, but you want to complete those passes and score on those. Like, you should be doing that if you want to be a good football team. So it was exciting to see that. And then you guys, I heard you briefly talking about Delpit there. I was just, I've been kind of like reflecting on his season a lot and how encouraged I am by the progress he's made, takeaways in the last 2 games, 2 specifically in this matchup. So there were some promising things on the defense, I think, overall from some of the bigger players that can be built on into this next game and into next season, which I think we talked about this last time. That's all we want to see, is those building blocks continue to be put together and improved on, so that we can go into this offseason feeling like there is really something there next year. So feeling pretty good.
We so badly want progress to be linear. We don't do well with guys taking step backs to figure it out. So, you and I on the podcast before the Carolina game both expected Delpit to have a breakout season, and we were not alone. That was a very popular sentiment both around the team and around the league, and it did not work out that way. He struggled early. He wasn't the one who said it, but John Johnson was the one who sort of relayed to the media that New England was rock bottom for him. But since then, he has just arguably been the most professional player on this defense. And that's taking nothing away from guys like Myles Garrett or anyone else, but just like in terms of game in, game out, of guys you could sort of count on to do what you expected them to do. And Grant Delpit is not perfect. Neither is John Johnson. The fact is, like, there were a couple plays where like the Browns sent pressure and the Commanders would throw basically like a hitch or something. And those are the things where, and I haven't had a chance to look at it. I'm hoping that what my worry is that those guys are like backing up, and I'm hoping they're, use the technical term, buzz their feet and just go downhill, because I think if they can get to doing that, then Delpit in particular is going to be in a situation where he may just not just blow up a play, but he may just pick one of those off if they get comfortable in doing that. But I think part of him is sort of hardwired to be like, I cannot do this again. I cannot allow somebody to go beat me again over the top. And I get it, but at the same time, he's been arguably the best linebacker on this team, even though he's a safety. He's leading the team in tackles. The 4 interceptions, you can say they're all bullshit, because you can go, oh, the Baker Mayfield one, he threw a terrible pass. He got the one in the blizzard conditions or whatever, the awful weather, and then Carson Wentz did Carson Wentz things. That's fine. But what I would point out is that the reason he got those 4 interceptions is because he's in the right spot. He's putting himself in position to make those plays. So, and the number I would point to is last year, between pass breakups and interceptions, Grant Delpit got to the football 4 times. This year, he's gotten to the ball 14 times, which is a good number for what he's doing. And I think people need to sort of recognize that. And this is a player where people were calling for him to be cut at points in the season, traded, whatever. But yeah, like I said, progress, not linear. This defense was a fantastic example of that for all the wrong reasons. But as you said, like, what do we want to see? We want to see progress. Well, I think we're seeing some of that progress, even if it's not sort of in time for this season to be, the season we hope for. But I think it was unrealistic to expect it to be. I think it was always going to be about next season. And now all we have are sort of these fun little players that Bree is just learning the existence of, like Reggie Ragland. Deion Jones has been here a little while, but he's doing some okay things. And we're getting guys to sort of contribute. Like right now, I look at Reggie Ragland and I say to myself, that Sione Takitaki injury sucks. But here's a guy they could probably sign for the minimum, take to training camp, keep in the offseason program, all that good stuff, and then see how he does and have a little insurance for what is probably going to take longer than we would like with Takitaki. He may not be ready in September. And you sort of have to work around that. He gives you sort of an option, the same way that like Tony Fields keeps doing things that you're sitting there going, wow, this is interesting. Like there's one play that really stood out to me in this last game where I think he made a tackle for like a 7-yard gain or something like this, but he was literally the only guy on the field who was going to make that play. And if he didn't, that guy was probably going to score. He has a knack, even if it's not like consistent, of sniffing out certain things and understanding what teams are doing, that he can sort of get in position and sort of make things happen. So the defense obviously needs a lot of work. But I'm sort of interested to see, one, that's one of the reasons I'm excited for Pittsburgh. And like Bree, I'm sort of sitting here go, wow, there's part of me that's going, I wish we had some more games to play. But I like what I'm seeing from these guys. Like I said, I admire the amount of give a shit this team has in a way that we listen to people like talk about, well, this team doesn't believe in Kevin Stefanski. This team's quitting on the coaching. Like you watch games like this and you're going, what are you talking about? And it's hard to like, other than just basically be like, okay, I guess you guys are not going to look at anything and entirely just frame this through, we have to get rid of this guy. And I'm going to, I have worked to this conclusion. I'm going to work backwards to try to argue for it. It's frustrating, but I don't think it's affecting the players at all.
I would say quite the opposite. I think if anything, as we talked about before, the Browns have played a ton of meaningless football in the month of January, and we've seen teams and rosters fully just kind of cash it in, if you will. And I would say that these last final few games has proven that these players are bought in to Stefanski and the staff. Now, one could say that maybe that is not a great thing, because can they talk themselves into keeping everyone on their staff? Some people may not deserve to have a job next year. I don't know. Like, those decisions obviously are going to be weighed and figured out over the next few weeks once the season is over. But I guess I just don't want complacency moving forward. So I just don't want this team to think, oh, well, we were able to turn things around these final couple of games, so therefore we're not going to change anything. Like, I don't want to be a team that is okay with that. Not saying that I want to just go and fire everyone, but I do hope that they take a good, honest look at themselves. I think Stefanski will be back, like, no issue, but I do think there are positions that probably do need to be evaluated and given a good hard look at.
Well, look, those are, Stefanski has to make that call. That's all I want in that light. Whether it's Joe Woods or Mike Prefer, I do not want an edict. I want Kevin Stefanski to say either I believe in this guy or I don't, and make the moves accordingly. There will be plenty of time to discuss, that element. Well, or may not be. Who knows? It may be Black Monday and they're just like, get out. But it's tough. I'm always sort of conflicted. I really like Joe Woods. I think he's a refreshingly honest guy who cares about his players, and they like. And if he is ultimately fired, I think fans and media will cheer. I do not think anyone in that building will. I think they will be somber in knowing that a good man is walking out of that door.
Yeah.
Which, frankly, is refreshing only from the standpoint of that has not happened a whole lot with this team. That too often it feels like you're exercising demons, which is unfortunate. And that's something they have to sort of figure out. But what I'm hoping happens with this game, is if they can win, and even if they lose, that they come out of this, and it seems like they've sort of embraced it. They are excited for 2023 right now. They are ready to get to work, within reason of, you got to take some time off, take care of your body. Like Amari Cooper's going to have surgery. God only knows what's going to happen with Myles Garrett's shoulder, all these things. But it seems like when the Browns get to the time of whether it's Deshaun organizing stuff on it, himself, if they're going to go back to the Bahamas or whatever, or some other locale, or, mini camps and OTAs and all that stuff, I think you're going to see a different energy. What I'm hoping specifically from the defensive side of the ball is that we get to this point where they come out of this and are excited to come back to work. But when it comes time to start talking about being a top 5 defense, they go, wait a minute, we just did this. Like, we can see how easily this can go badly. Let's just shut up. And I don't mean that in terms of shut up and dribble or anything like that, but just keep the excitement and the focus in the building, keep that energy in the building, and just work and try to continue to get better as best you can, because you've seen 2 years in a row that hype doesn't really do you any good, that it's got to be earned confidence, earned credibility. The teams have to believe that you're good because you're good on the field, not just because you're going to tell them how good you are. I think this defense has to grow up in a way that, obviously, look, they got a lot younger, but I do think that they have so many young players like Myles Garrett, the elder statesman, he's 27. I think they need to mature quite a bit, and I think that's going to be part of it. If we start seeing that next year, I think it will be a better indication of what's coming. Because the flip side of that is you never hear the offense talk on this team, and part of that is because they have several mutes on the team. But Nick Chubb isn't going to tell you how good he's going to be. Amari Cooper's not going to tell you how good he's going to be, and we weren't sure anyway. So I'll be curious to see if they make that adjustment.
Yeah, I don't know how to act with 3 people now.
It's hard. I'm like, I don't want to interrupt anyone.
No, please go.
No, it's just the thing I keep thinking about with the defense specifically is, last season they ended on like a strong note where everyone was feeling so promising about that group coming into this year. And I mean, I remember coming on this podcast before the Panthers game and we were like, yeah, this defense is really going to have to carry this team this season. And it turned out to be quite the opposite of that. So I think it's going to be really important in 2023, those first couple games, like seeing what that defense is going to look like coming out of the gate, because if it follows a similar pattern, people are going to lose their minds.
Yes, 100% agree. And that's where I think about the complacency piece, because I think we can talk ourselves into like, let's just keep this going for consistency's sake, when we essentially ended last season in a very similar fashion of the defense playing really well and feeling like we were going to essentially get better from even what we left last year. And we're going to have a lot of turnover again on the roster. Like, I don't know what the pieces are going to look like on defense. So like, that's another thing that we have to weigh in and think about, outside of a couple of key pieces in terms of the cornerback room and specifically Myles Garrett. Like, we don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what this team does, especially if the offense continues to perform the way it did in one half of football. Can they pull that together for a full game? Because what you don't want to have happen is you have this really dynamic offense and then you have a defense that isn't able to hold its own weight, because regardless of how good the offense is, if we can't stop anyone, like Deshaun Watson in this offense isn't going to be able to win football games alone. I mean, we saw that this year. So I don't know. There's a lot of pressure, in my opinion, as we head into next year. A lot of pressure on a team that is going to have a losing record.
There's no getting around that. I mean, the team, the way they operated, they brought this on themselves. The flip side of that, this is also exactly the situation they want to be in. Now, do they wish certain things went better than they did in terms of players they've picked or just the way things worked out in the standings? Absolutely. But if you're the Browns and you're sitting there going, we have Deshaun Watson, we have Amari Cooper, we have David Njoku, we have DPJ, who is probably going to get extended. We just locked up Jack Conklin. We've got 3 All-Pros on the offensive line that are extended for the foreseeable future. We've got the best pass rusher in football, DB, a great set of corners, Grant Delpit, all these things. You're sitting there, JOK is going to come back healthy. You're sitting there going, you have all these things excited to have. That's exactly where you're going to be, but it undoubtedly comes with the pressure and you have to deliver. But, whether it's Andrew Berry or Kevin Stefanski or anyone else, this is the thing they have dreamed of having their entire career. So it is absolutely pressure, but I think it's the most fun thing that they've ever had to do. Like, contrast that against like the pressure that was on Carolina's head coach heading to this year. Like, that is not fun pressure. You did not have the situation you wanted to be in. So those are the things you have to sort of deal with. Now, to your other point about not knowing what the defense is going to look like, that's true. That's going to be a fun discussion, but one we're probably going to save, along with where I've sort of mapped out the 7 mock drafts Bree's going to do throughout the process for the off season and all the things she's super excited about. But
hey, Pete, did I tell you I only work during the football season, like when games are played?
Oh yeah.
And I now get like a 9-month break.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, Abby, you and me, we'll get it going. All right. So much to take away. It's funny. That's what makes football fun. I guess sports in general fun is like the first half was just so bad. And yet we all feel very encouraged, very optimistic because of the second half. So with what we've seen from the Steelers in the last couple of weeks, It has not been pretty, but it's been enough. Kenny Pickett has made some great plays. I don't know what I don't even know what to think of him as a quarterback at this point. How do we feel going into this game? 7-9 versus 8-8, the opportunity to take the Steelers out at their place. How good do we feel about the Browns' chances this week?
I mean, I feel like they're going to show up motivated just based on, like you said, how we played in the second half there. And I just think you always want to play hard against your division teams. Like we have seen them repeatedly show up against the teams in our division. So I do think they're going to play hard. And like you said, they have something to play for. Like I think they want to play for their coach. They want to play for each other. They want to play for next season and the motivation going into the offseason. The only thing I always hesitate on with Pittsburgh is like, Mike Tomlin really does have his teams over 500 all the time. Like, are we really going to be able to be the team that's going to finish that long-standing record? And they do have something to play for still, being that they have a path to the playoffs. So I don't really know what my expectations are, because I just feel like both teams are going to be very motivated, even though only one of them can potentially be in the playoffs.
I don't care how the Browns win this game. Just freaking go win this game. Like, just go. I don't figure it out. Like, Mike Tomlin is such a good coach, obviously, just based on his ability to just put a bunch of scraps together. Like, Mike Tomlin is given 3 ingredients and he makes a gourmet meal. I like really don't understand. Like, I cannot wrap my head around this for the life of me. And it's so confusing watching them, because I'm like, are they good or are they not good? Like, I watched that game on Sunday and it was literally the most boring game I've ever watched. But also I was like, I don't know if they're good or not. Like, it's a very confusing football team. But to Abby's point, regardless, they always show up against us. We oftentimes tend to get out physicaled by the Steelers, and I just want them to either match or outplay them from a physicality standpoint. And I just want the offense to light them up. Nothing would make me happier than to score 1,000,000 points against this Steelers defense, because all we hear about is how great the Steelers defense is, how great TJ Watt is, how great this line is, blah, blah, blah. I'm so sick of hearing about that. I hope Nick Chubb runs for over 100 yards. I hope we score 4 throwing touchdowns. I mean, Pete, like, I want all the fireworks on offense. I don't care if we give up 40 points, as long as we score 41. I'll be fine.
Yeah, the only thing I don't want to see happen is it comes down to a battle between Cade York and Chris Boswell. Because both are entirely unpredictable.
That's like that's things of nightmares are made of, actually.
Yeah.
You know what else is funny though is Steelers fans, when we're talking about Mike Tomlin and how great he is, like Steelers fans have wanted him fired throughout the season. So that's
every single year.
Yes, that shows you how fan bases think. Like almost everyone wants their coach fired and thinks that somebody else is going to be better. So I do think that's kind of funny just thinking about that.
Well, if the Browns beat the Steelers, I cannot wait to see the meltdowns on Steelers Twitter and Reddit boards, because they're 100% are going to be calling for Tomlin to be fired.
Steelers media, the local media. Oh yeah.
So good.
Andrew Filipponi
meltdown.
He is willing to have himself kicked in a certain area, his man parts. If the Browns have a better record than the Steelers, I don't know if that. I assume with the tiebreaker that has
is
to
Ken
count.
Carmen going to be doing the kicking? Is what I want to know.
I can't imagine a wider foot to do the job. To your point, Bree, I agree. That's always the concern. It's physicality. You go to some of these games, like the first matchup, the Browns were largely out physicaled in the first half. The Steelers went away from running the ball in the second half quite a bit. It sort of played into the Browns' strengths. So
Najee Harris on Sunday looked very physical, and just knowing how our defense has been against the run, like that gave me pause.
Well, that was his first 100-yard game of the season.
I know. He literally looked like he was just like a little like rock, a boulder going down a hill.
Really good. Very fresh. Like, it was like he had just started playing this year. I was like, oh, okay.
Well, maybe I was kind of hoping that they're all a little tired out from that last game a little bit, that the physicality.
They might be.
But yeah, the thing is that the Browns and the Steelers are completely different teams from the ones that played week 3. Kenny Pickett, it was Mason, what's his face?
Mitch Trubisky, right?
Mitch Trubisky started the first one.
I didn't even remember.
Kenny Pickett. Now their offensive line's a little bit better. The Browns, obviously it's Deshaun Watson as opposed to Jacoby Brissett, and certain other things have changed. They're obviously defensively. That's the game where Anthony Walker got hurt. That was
They also didn't have TJ Watt, right?
They did not.
Yeah, okay.
Him being available is a big difference, but that was 5 season-ending injuries to linebackers ago.
Yep.
So it's going to be.
When you put it that way, Pete.
But it just that's just how long the season goes. That was week 3 was forever ago. So you're not entirely sure. There's certain things that both teams are going to do because that's who they are. But it's going to be a great game to watch. And like I said, we're going to put in a rational amount of weight on it. We know Berea does with Jimmy Haslam. Not that I expect that's going to change anyone's job security. I have never believed that the Browns were going to fire Kevin Stefanski. It just never made any sense. But it just changes. It changes the outlook coming out of this game. If they win, Deshaun Watson wins his first one in Pittsburgh. That's a statement for him. It's a statement for the Browns. They would have swept them, obviously. And if Pittsburgh wins, it's all about Kenny Pickett. It's all about the Steelers are back and all this other stuff. So there's so much that goes into this game. And unfortunately, the Browns put more. I should say the Browns side of this rivalry is much more engaged than the Steelers side because the Steelers understandably look at the Browns as sort of, who are you, given the success they've had. But lately, the last couple of years, the Baker Mayfield era, they've sort of rallied, and now moving into Jacoby Brissett, he got a win. If Watson can do that you have a chance to set the tone for what's to come. And the AFC North as a whole. I mean, the other thing that's on the line for this is the Browns win, they are 4-2 in the division. They lose, they're 3-3. They would have split with everybody. So we'll see. But Abby, I appreciate you jumping on. I hope you got all your shopping done.
I did. Thanks for letting me gloat about my winning record.
Well, absolutely. Listen,
anytime.
We need all the good karma we can get going into this one. And if you lose, then you're fired. But other than that, so there's nothing. So we shall see. Look, I look forward to it regardless. Hopefully Bree will be back next week. I don't know when her 9-month vacation starts. But one way or the other we'll be here. Looking forward to it. And so we will talk to you all next week.